All right, this is Todd Atkins. I'm back with Mr. Miguel Iturrate, and it's been a while since we've done an MMA Conspiracy Hour sort of show, and so today we're going to time to talk about what we just saw at UFC 308, and also some of the latest UFC antitrust trial news, and also Francis Ngannou's fight in PFL. So Miguel, I wanted to first start with I like to start with the biggest fight first. So we have Max Holloway versus Ilia Topuria in this main event. I thought it was a real interesting fight. I kind of wanted to let you give your thoughts first.
Yeah, this was definitely a nice healing fight with high level to watch. And it comes with the big, highlight reel ending that people enjoy. So I think there's no way that you can say you didn't get your money's worth. Max didn't get taken out in, the first 20 seconds or the first 2 minutes or something like that. Um, I think you can maybe give him one or two of the, maybe round one. I think you can maybe give it to Max. And Max always, performs like that. It's kind of sad to see him get hurt at the end, but we've suspected. The thing about Taporia is that he still needs more fights. You know what I mean? So he's just was, you know, he won the belt. He's got that, but you need to notch five or, Anderson Silva had 9 title defenses, things like that. That's where you get yourself into heady territory. But in terms of potential, you know, I can't think of too many guys that have kind of the total package. Me, in a way, he doesn't fight the same, but the hype around him can maybe be compared to like the early BJ Penn hype. Where it was like the guy's a complete guy. He's got jiu-jitsu world championships. He's got excellent boxing. Um, you know, he's mean, and that's kind of where I was looking for comparison with. He dealt with adversity well. Um, because like I said, I think Max did fight a smart fight. Um, Once he got hurt, he wasn't able to get out of the way, and that's what caught up to him. But uh, he made Taporia work, and I think Taporia, stepped up, and when he finally caught him, eh, you know, eh, he did something we've never seen done before. Just as a fan of the sport and a fan of Max, even though, people watch me here, they know I sometimes have a different slant on Max that worries me, going back now years to the Khabib fight that was canceled and maybe some neurological problems. I don't know if, he took stem cells or, some type of other treatment, legal or illegal. I don't even want to speculate on that, but, it seems like he turned the corner and didn't have those problems for a long time. So we'll see how this materializes. What I would hate to see is I would hate for Max to turn into Chuck Liddell or Cody Garbrandt, where now that they've caught him, he starts keeps getting caught. You know what I mean? And that's a worry. That's a worry. I hope Max has banked enough money away that he might even consider retirement. I think a lot of people put him on a top 10 or top 15 all time list. I, you know, I think that's a good spot um, to be in. I think, that's a lot of accomplishments and a lot of laurels that you have nothing to be ashamed of. You have nothing to say, like, I could have done more at this point. He's got a lot of fights too. You know what I mean? So I hate pushing guys towards retirement, but this might be the right time for him so that he can enjoy his kids and family and the rest of his life and maybe, train another generation of guys from Hawaii, something so that, that his legacy continues in that way. But that's one of the things when he got knocked out and I saw the way it happened, he, stumbled around a little bit and then he got finished and then he got hit a couple extra times while he was down and out. Um, that's what I thought of. I thought of Cody and Chuck and guys like that. You know, I mean, those guys went out with 4 or 5 knockouts at the end of their career, getting knocked out in brutal fashion, and I don't want to see that for Max.
Yeah, I mean, knowing local people the way I do, I don't think he's going to want to go out that way personally. But you know, and as far as all time lists, when it comes to like featherweight, he's arguably maybe the best of all time. You got him, Aldo, Volkanovski. Kind of these
Yeah.
three. And what's incredible is Toporia's knocked out two of them already.
Well, that's the thing about
You know.
Topuria. Once Topuria notches another 4 or 5 fights, maybe retaining the belt, keeping the belt, and doing it in this type of fashion, he's going to curl up into that list. Right now, I don't think he's got the body of work to say he's the greatest. He has the potential to be the greatest of all time. He's clearly shown that. But I do think that greatest of all time is not just the eye test one fight to the next. I think it is also a body of work. And I think he has more to add to his body of work before he passes Max or anything like that on that list. But the potential's there. The potential's there. I love um, the mindset. You know what I mean? I think that's one thing that again is I know he's from Georgia and it's not exactly the same thing, but once we start getting into those Eastern European guys, and he lives in Spain, um, but there is a little bit of a hardcore mentality to them that I think adds to the total package that they have there. You know what I mean? Um, so I like everything I see with Taporia. Max was a little taller. Um, so we'll see how that goes. Max has fought at 155. It might behoove him to maybe take a couple of not frontline A plus hard fights at 155 if he wants to win and go out on a couple of fight winning streak. I think people will still definitely want to pay him to see him, but this was one of those fights where I think that he's at a crossroads.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, he's performed well at 55. I mean, his fight with Poirier was a really good fight, even though he didn't win. And then he knocked out Gaethje. So it's not like he
Yeah, and
hasn't performed at 55. He has.
sure. Yeah, with the worries about neurological damage,
Mhm.
and you don't know when that can manifest itself. You don't want to see, you turn around and it's been like, oh, I haven't seen Evander Holyfield in a few years, and you hear him talking, you're like, oh my gosh, he's really messed up. You know what I mean? Um, you don't want to see that manifest itself later on down the line, and he would be getting hit by bigger guys. So it's something where I don't think yeah, he beat Gaethje. He's performing fantastic against Poirier, but I don't want to put him in there against the frontline guys or try to materialize into another title shot or something for him. Um, I'd like to see him, if he wants to, if he doesn't want to retire now and go out like and I could see that. Um, maybe a couple fights at 155 against the second line of guys would behoove him and get him a couple of wins so he can go out with that sense of pride. But yeah, like I said, I think he should seriously think about it. He has got nothing to be ashamed of. And we don't have a lot of Chuck Liddell's interviews aren't all that impressive anymore either. You know what I mean? And we don't have that long history of guys in the sport where we can, you can say there's so we don't know the repercussions. But I think Max is a guy that, um, I mean, it's hard for me to think of too many guys that have had so many grinding long fights in his career in the last 10 years. You know what I mean? Max has been a warrior for the company. I mean, sure, he's banking some money and stuff and taking care of his family. And I'm sure that that's, part of his mindset where it's like, I got to keep this going. I'm doing good. He's been a champion. He's on all-time great lists and things. So it's hard to look at that, but there comes a point, especially he's not 24 anymore. Um, I think you guys start thinking about, okay, well, I'm okay now, but what am I going to be like at 55 if I take another, couple of, you know, 4 or 5 round fights or things like that, where you 25-minute fight. He has a lot of them. You know what I mean? Even if he wins, you've been you've been put through a meat grinder. So I that's he's one of the guys I've constantly expressed his concern. He's made me look dumb, in terms of because of his performances and stuff. But I'd rather he continue make me look dumb. I don't want to see him interviewed as a retired fighter and be like, "Guess what, Todd? I told you so." You know what I mean? And so that's the thing. That hopefully he can sit down with his family and make a wise decision. Maybe it is. I got to go out in a win. I can't go out like that. Maybe it's I've got 5 million in the bank. I'd like to get to 6 million. Maybe there's something like that in his thinking because we're going to talk about some other guys too, but I haven't seen anybody really say too many times, "Oh, I have enough money." So money might be a motivation for him still, especially once you've tasted upper echelon money for the UFC. He may say, "Oh, I got to get a couple more paychecks in just to make sure." So, but like I said, I just hope he makes a wise decision.
Yeah, I thought it was an interesting fight. Topuria, as you said, his shots were missing early, maybe by about this much. You know, and then as Max was moving away, he is missing his big ones by about this much. But he was smart enough to kind of keep kicking Max's leg, and he knew if I could slow him down this much, now my shots will land. And I
Yep,
think
yep. He beat up the front leg. He also,
got
I
an early
noticed
takedown.
he forced Max. It seemed to me, and you know, it seemed to me like, okay, Max has always had a fantastic jab, and he's long, and he was longer in this fight, so he did a good job early of keeping him away. It seemed to me like he did incorporate more kicks, which is more distance and keeping the guy away further. So I think Max gave Taporia his respect in respect to making adjustments in a ring strategy. Um, but at no point, Taporia took some punches to the face and that, but at no point did he hurt him. And that's the worry with that too. Is I call it the Randy Couture effect because Randy was the first guy that with his motor and everything, but because he didn't have he had some knockouts, but he didn't have incredible like triple L knockout power, which at some point as you get older forces you to fight a perfect 5 round fight. And that becomes more and more difficult. And then, we just saw Max get caught. Like I said, like I've expressed, I don't want to keep seeing that. I don't want to keep seeing him get caught.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of fans out there that didn't believe that Max could be knocked out. Because he's just taking everybody's best shots.
Yeah,
So I
yeah,
think
and
there was
that's
that.
that.
I think there was that shock factor.
Well, here's the thing is, until now he hadn't been knocked out. So it's hard to say. Yeah, he can be knocked out, but once it happens, and this is like I mentioned with a couple of great fighters in Cody and Chuck. Once it happens, the frequency of or the possibility that it continues to happen or happens more frequently goes up. And now nobody can say he can't be knocked out because he's been knocked out. So that's why I use the word crossroads. That's the crossroads he's at. He crossing the threshold. How old is Max?
I think he's in his early 30s,
He at
maybe
34.
32 or 34. Yeah.
Okay, so as we've mentioned, also with and he's not a small fighter like a 125 or anything like that, but 145 is still not a huge man. And you don't, Aldo, I guess, but Aldo didn't look great towards the end of his career. You know, I don't want to see him fighting until he's 40. I think that would be detrimental to him in his health as well. The smaller guys have less mileage at the end of their career. That's just something I think is, with the examples of boxing as well, that we see that, plentifully. And hey, the passing of the torch, that's what we saw.
Yeah. It was pretty amazing fight, really. I wonder why maybe Max didn't try to keep him away more with his kicks, because eventually he let him close. Some of that could have been because his leg was getting kicked out, but
Yeah. And you get, I mean, he's got a motor, used to 5 round fights. Um, you don't want to say he was starting to gas, but I think that there is, they mentioned it in the broadcast too, that he wanted to keep Topuria away from him, in the first round because Topuria's got blitzing power early in the fight. So even that reflects to me that Topuria, you're at 100%, and then all of a sudden, is there a difference when you're at 98% or 95%? Still, you're a premium top flight athlete capable of doing a lot of dangerous things and a lot of damage, but is, when you're not at the optimal, once the fight has started, things happen.
Yeah, why do you think Topuria showed he had that power in the third round even. But why do you think it was that he was able to do to max what guys like Poirier and Gaethje and Aldo and some of these other guys have not been able to do?
You know, there's a little bit of an edge that may, like I said, the mileage is hard to quantify the mileage, but I can't think of another guy in the last 10 years who's put in as many high mileage fights, even if they won, 5 round fights are 5 round fights, how many of those do you really have in you? So, I think that's one of those things. I think that in youth, youth is a fantastic advantage in the combat sports, especially when somehow you've managed to get your youth, uh, in your youth time, you've managed to also get your level so high like Taporia. So he's a guy, if he's 26 now, in 7 or 8 years, someone's going to catch him the way he just caught Max. It's inevitable. That's time. So, and people are going to be like, well, we've never seen him knocked out, or, this, that, or the other thing. There's a cycle in this that I think is inevitable, and we've seen it a lot. We've seen a lot with fighters. We may have seen it with Whitaker too. I think Whitaker's another guy that put in miles. He has some very good hard fights and stuff, and he was facing a younger opponent, and similar to Topuria, a guy whose hunger and motivation seemed to be off the charts too. With Chimaev, and you know, um, yeah, it didn't surprise me. I enjoyed the fight while it was happening, but watching it, I did have that feeling of, okay, is Max going to dodge this bullet one more time, or are we going to finally see him get caught?
Yeah, I think with the Chimaev fight is more. I think Whitaker believed what a lot of people thought. Yeah, I have good takedown defense. Yeah, you do against people that aren't like that. Even the guys when you're training in a room like Chimaev is, where I watched the countdown show and he's training with one of the greatest Russian coaches of all time. He trained at like two or three of their greatest Olympians, and he's just in a wrestling room. Even the guys that are a notch below are outstanding guys. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not just the Olympians. The guys, the B level guys in the room are A plus plus compared to most people.
Yeah,
And I think he just got run over.
yeah. What you have to consider too here is that it's a product of the Soviet system of sports, where they prepared that. When we saw, and keep in mind that Vladimir Klitschko, even Usyk now, and Lomachenko and stuff, they come from that. Even though some of those guys are Ukrainian also, but Ukraine was part of Russia, and we still have a system in place that has given them results for decades. So, here's the scary part: is you hear things people say like, "Oh, wait till you see these guys or whatever." Well, how about half the guys in the room with Chimaev? What would really happen if they decide to come over and flood the sport and actually train a little bit to do
Mhm.
this and then come over. You'd have the roster taken over.
Yeah, I don't think people realize, like, I mean, I trained with a guy, Joji Miyabi, in Japan, and I brought professional fighters to train with him. I bought Ryan Bowe. I got, we took him to rodeo style sometimes, which is the Kotani Brothers gym, and he slaughtered all of those guys. And this is a guy that nobody knows his name.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know what I mean? And those guys are out there, especially in
yeah,
Russia.
no, yeah. The Russian teams are 10 deep. You know what I mean? Yeah, 12 deep. So what if the bottom six guys, they leave the Olympic accolades to the top guys, and the bottom six guys come over? Those are still going to be elite fighters in the UFC. It doesn't apply to everybody, but I did mention this earlier in the interview. Part of it is like, okay, we got Bo Nickel, right? Bo's a pretty good wrestler. Bo, has done a lot of things. Like I was impressed by him just even going to take on Gordon Ryan, and he did not have a bad showing there. He actually got a nice suplex in, But Bo, who didn't have that mindset is Kale Sanderson. Kale didn't even try it. Every once in a while you run into a guy that maybe he'll try it, and then they realize, this isn't for me. You remember Townsend Saunders? If anybody checks off athletic boxes, accolades, and things, Townsend Saunders did that. But as soon as he lost the fight, Kevin Jackson, Kenny Monday, and then, like I said, Cale Sanderson and a slew of great American wrestlers that didn't even try it. And that's okay. That's okay. But it does have to do with mindset because I think if you walk into that Russian room and you said, all right, we're going to throw some money around, most of the guys there would try it. The mindset's different. They're like, oh, why not? It's just another competition. They don't look at it as a fight or as something, you know, with a little more edge that they're maybe not cut out for. But I think you see that like Mark Coleman was cut out to fight. Mark Kerr was not. And we saw the difference as their careers progressed and as people got to a little bit more familiar and were able to actually stand up to Kerr, the wheels came off. Those are his own words to me. The wheels came off of my career. And he just, and you could tell he's not like Mark. Mark loved it. We sat down with Mark for an interview, and I'm talking about Mark Coleman. And now he's in his 50s, you know, and, he's been through ups and downs and, he's beaten alcohol and things like that, but he's got a lot of miles and stuff. And if you get him talking, he will still tell you about a fight he had in college with another I'm sorry, a football player who was also a little older than him and a tough guy. About how um, him and Randleman, had to take on guys and things like that. Um, if you don't have that kind of mindset, MMA is not for you.
Yeah, it's remember Kareem Gabber, who competed in, like, I think it was K1. I forgot, one of their mixed MMA shows, and he's one of the greatest wrestlers. He was a champion, Olympic champion, Greco-Roman. He
We've
got
seen,
blasted out fast.
we've seen. Look,
Never seen again.
the greatest wrestler of all time tried MMA and did it once, and that's Alexander Karelin. Then if you look at it more, the guy that eventually caught Karelin and beat him also tried MMA full times for the money, and that's Rulon Gardner. I'm talking about when you're going to sit down to do this, and you say, "I'm going to do this. I'd like a 30 fight careers in my future," kind of thing. I think you see a certain type of wrestler that's cut out for that, a certain type of wrestler that's not cut out for that. And in the Americans, I don't want to say we're softer or whatever, because those guys aren't soft, but it has to do with the mind. And I think the Russians and Eastern Europeans, I don't know, they value I don't know. I can't put my finger exactly on it, but it's like they really don't care. It's like, so I get punched in the face. That makes a difference to some of the guys. You know what I mean? I don't like to get punched in the face. You have guys like, Vanderlei Silva love to be punched in the face. So it's not always just wrestlers and stuff like that. You see that mindset in guys that have flashes and times at the elite level. And I think without that, you won't reach that level.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. Think about the other thing I find amusing is people saying that Khamzat was ducking people. It, and then he comes out of the shadows and just toys with Robert Whitaker like a cat with a ball of string. It's one of those things that I think it shocks people because of that. He's ill. They think he's ducking fights. Then he comes out and just wipes the floor with one of the best fighters in the world.
I've seen a lot of his interviews, and he's dangerous. He's dangerous. You know what I mean? If war broke out in Chechnya or in that area of the world, and he had to go back there, he'd be fighting in the mountains with machine guns and things like that. And he's a dangerous guy. I saw recently an interview with him where he was he was talking to Daniel Cormier, and Cormier told him, he goes, "If me and you had to wrestle in the octagon, I would toss you around." And Cormier is, you know, 40 pounds bigger and stuff, and just confidence of his response. It wasn't bluster. He was confident. He was like, "You have no chance with me, Cormier." You know, in the earlier days of his career, he used to always say, and his English isn't all that terrific, so, but he always used to say, "You don't want my smoke." He is more dangerous than Khabib because I think that Khabib is more respectful. I don't think I haven't seen Chimaev show the respect of Khabib or God, what's the name of the 155-pound champion who cut from the same cloth as Khabib?
Islam.
Um, Islam. I think those guys were brought up a little different, like less rude, less, you know, lack of respect makes Chimaev dangerous. I haven't seen him say, "Yeah, this is going to be a hard fight," or "I'm worried about this guy," or "I'm feeling like this is going to be a good test." He's always just like, "Bring this, let's do this," you know. So I'm not a huge fan because I think that wrestling takedown stuff. I think I'd like to see more striking from him at times, and I don't want to pin him as boring. Because he does run people over, and you like you said, playing with him like a cat in a ball of yarn. But um, there is that one trick pony aspect where I'd like to see a little more development, just as a critic of fights and stuff. But you know, um, he reminds me of Kareem Barklev, a guy that is dangerous.
Yeah, I think it's you know, in a way for me it's interesting because he being a one to say he's a one trick pony or whatever. He has decent striking, but what I mean is where he can take this one element and say, "Look, I'm just going to shove it down everybody's throat, and no one's going to be able to stop it." You know, I can do this to anybody that I want to.
Yeah, including Daniel Cormier. So I don't know. Like I said, I like to be better. Like I like Islam better is like you keep there's things about Shemai, like for example, I'm just a reporter that judges, right? So he would just, but little things like he had some type of fraud thing with a Bitcoin type of thing like that and stuff. You don't see Khabib and those guys doing something like that. You know what I mean? I think Shemaev is a guy who just doesn't care on so many different levels that makes him probably the most dangerous guy in the UFC right now.
Well, I do think he said something. I don't know if he was alluding to that, but he said, "When I became famous, I had all these people saying, 'You should do this, you should do that.'" And that's kind of the reason why he went to the mountains to train with this coach. Here,
And, and,
I don't have all these people saying you should do this, you should do that. I just have.
and he made a good decision. He made a good decision, but like I point out the difference. Whereas the other guys that are similar and from the same culture and things didn't fall into that trap.
One thing you said about the confidence I saw where, Dan O'Cormier was talking to Islam and he was saying, do you think you could have a competitive match with Jordan Burroughs? And you're saying, yeah, of course. Why not?
Yeah,
And I think he believed that.
sure,
Cormier
sure.
was shocked, but he's like, of course I could. Why?
You know, I like the confidence. And there's a fine line between confidence and arrogance. And I think Khabib, Islam, and Chimaev a little more. I don't, I don't
And
think they show me
Topuria.
arrogance.
And Topuria,
Yeah,
too.
I don't think they show me arrogance.
Yeah, that's something going on.
Yeah, my dogs were reacting to something outside, so and it's dark, so I don't know if it's another dog or something. But I'm all good.
Hopefully nothing dangerous. But let's talk a little bit about Ankalaev because there is some controversy with him. He's kind of been turned down for the title shots. They aren't letting him fight Pereira. I haven't listened to any of the post-fight stuff, so I don't know what was said, but I know that he had said the UFC came to him and said this fight has to be exciting for you to get a title shot before the fight.
Especially, it's so you notice that this fight was in Abu Dhabi, right? They're going to have trouble bringing these guys over to the States. And it's getting worse because a war that Putin himself promised would be over in a month and even a shorter period of time, and people didn't think that would turn into what it is. He's now grinding on into like year 3. So it's not like they're going to all of a sudden be like, yeah, let's be liberal with visas for Russians and try to nurture the relationship that way. So yeah, I think it's worrisome because I think that you're now talking about a good part of the roster that may not be able to come over to the United States. Um, in terms of talent, he looks to be another one of those guys like that. In terms of the mindset, he also does look to be another one of those guys like that where, you know, fight Pereira, yeah, hell yeah. Fight John Jones, yeah, hell yeah. He doesn't care. So um, I think that the UFC has problem with stocking the roster with so many fighters from Russia. Because again, you go back to a conversation that we unearthed in an interview. I believe it was Corey Anderson who left the UFC and went to Bellator or that type of move, and he was sat down. And I think it Corey that was the first guy to drop and knock out Johnny Walker.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
I think it was Corey Anderson that derailed the Johnny Walker train for the first time, and he was told, if Johnny Walker beats you, he'll get a title shot. If you beat him, we're not sure. And so they look and they want to tell you, Instagram and things like that. That's the part where this is not a sport if it's managed that way. On the contrary side, then they shouldn't be signing so many Eastern Europeans. They should be trying to nurture more of the UFC fighters from the States. Latin Americans don't represent. I see more Russians than Latin Americans on the roster. Europeans from Western Europe, and they don't. And some people say, well, they're not as good. It's like, okay, now what did they do with the UFC's training centers and things like that? That doesn't seem to. They've gotten lazy in some of those cases because they should be putting people through a lifting of the rosters. Japan has completely fallen off the face of the planet. We've seen Chinese girls do very well in the UFC, obviously, ladies. But where are the Chinese men athletes? And here's another problem. This goes back to the old days. when you get into the top Chinese guys that may be able to, train UFC and then, be able to come over and fight, or mixed martial arts and be able to come over and fight and compete, and the Russians too, steroids will become an issue. And the UFC seems to be coy about the steroid issue and not really care. But, you know, people may or may not know the story. I'll repeat it very quickly. But when they did the Olympics in Russia, the KGB, or the FSB as it's called now, went to the clinic and replaced every doctor with a KGB agent. These are facts that the Russians deny, but there are Russian people that have defected and things like that have confirmed that it's true. And they have been, I believe the last Olympics, Russian athletes had to kind of compete under a different flag because the Russians were banned. They have a different mindset over that type of stuff. They consider it just competition, not cheating, trying to find an edge. So this is a philosophical difference that is going to be a little bit hard to find. And here's the other part is so the UFC, they got rid of USADA. How do you collect piss or blood? It's not like you show up at the arena. Like I remember at Trump Taj Mahal in Atlantic City, the guys would be given a little bottle and somebody follows them into the bathroom and watches them do it. And then they come out and they put it on a table and this old man is sitting there just labeling, you know, the uh, the bottles. He didn't go back to his hotel room and put that stuff in his mini bar. It has to go through a chain of, which would be what you do in Russia. Well, take it to the medical clinic that there's every FSB agent, who's got some medical training there, falsifying stuff. So you can't fight a system like that with just a couple of people. To me, I still think steroids they should make it legal, and especially with the doctors, force the doctors to do more than fill out paperwork and to have real patient relationships with the fighters. But the UFC avoids that. As much of a clown and almost an evil force as yeah, what's his name? The guy who was managing Diego Sanchez.
Josh Fabia.
Okay, Josh Fabia, yes. As much of a pariah as he is, one of the things he mentioned is if we look at Diego Sanchez, my client here, there may be evidence of cognitive decline. And Diego, there you go. Diego's another guy. Diego may have more mileage than freaking Max. You know what I mean? And you start to notice these things. And he expressed concern, and he was ridiculed for it. And everything else he did was a joke. But there, in that particular instance where he says the UFC doesn't care about the mental decline of fighters and the physical work, they make them go do all their medical and their contract workers and things like that. In that part of his argument, he may have been right.
Yeah, and he wanted a copy of Diego's medical records, which I don't think sat well with the UFC.
Sure. Sure. You should be able to request medical records from the boxing commissions. They should keep them on file, right? I've given the example several times on the podcast, but Spencer Fisher. Spencer Fisher fought Hermes Franca, and he says after that fight, he was never the same. He was in the airport going home, and he couldn't walk a straight line, from following a line on the floor. Yet he fought 7 more times in the UFC. So they don't care. They're towing the line because if you don't care and you don't take a hard line with those athletes from over there in some way, shape, or form, they will run you over on that cheating. And the thing is make it legal so it's not cheating anymore. But if you're going to why have rules if you're not going to enforce them?
I think they're maybe at that point now because we saw some guys that look pretty bricked up, several on this card, that look like they're pretty obviously, and no
Again,
one's catching those guys.
in the UAE, what is the chain of command to do the testing?
The UFC, they
They
self,
have to,
yeah.
so they take the samples. Like I said, you can't put them in a mini fridge. That's not the way this works. So you have to go to a clinic that's owned by one of the VIP sheiks. A clinic where in the past it was rumored that during the Abu Dhabi tournaments, fighters with some drug problems were taken there and they were handled off. Mark Kerr specifically, that he would go there and get pain pills. Mark did deny that in an interview when I asked him, but I still have some doubts, especially in an authoritarian country like that. Those VIPs, like Kadyrov, like Putin, can do whatever they want. Saudi Arabia, you think this MLB is that what they call him?
What's that?
The leader of Saudi Arabia, the crown prince.
Oh, I forgot his name, but yeah, I
But
think it's Suleiman maybe.
no, it's not Suleiman. It's Mohammed
Oh,
bin Saleh. Anyway,
yeah, something like that.
it's,
Yeah.
his name doesn't matter. That's where the PFL was recently. We can switch to that subject too. But do you think there's anybody who's going to tell him what to do?
Nope. And some people
So
had suspicions that maybe Khamzat had missed weight because he weighed in last and he barely made weight, with minutes to spare or whatever. You know, People were saying that maybe they had done some stuff over there in that regard. I don't think so though, because a lot of the guys were weighed in the same. Like for some reason, when they still use these scales that have to balance out like this, like these old styles, which is ridiculous. But as soon as it stops, like it's still moving, and the guy will just, all right, you made weight. They don't even let the
yeah, no,
scale balance out.
we've seen many instances of. We talked at length about the Ryan Garcia failure to make weight in boxing. the The fight starts maybe at the beginning of the week when the fighters lay eyes on each other for the first time. It's almost like they're locked in the octagon by the time of weigh-ins. That's where everybody's on, everybody's serious, all the mind games are there, and whatever they may be, look at your opponent, smile, blow him a kiss, push him. That is almost part of the fight. So no shenanigans that happen during the weigh-ins at this point would surprise me.
And I've seen some YouTubers say that they don't think because there's no commission over there, they don't have any pull. That the UFC and the UAE or Abu Dhabi, they don't have any pull. I mean, to my knowledge, like Sheikh Tanoon still owns 10% of the UFC. Am I right or wrong on that?
I've heard different,
Oh,
but
okay.
they've got a couple of people of a high level that are still interested in fighting. Um, you have to consider that with the Saudi presence in the sport too, that there is a competition between them, cousins, or however you want to quantify that relationship, but they don't like to be second fiddle to anybody. And like I mentioned, who owns the clinic where the trail of the samples has to go to be put on ice, to be put in a real fridge, to be handled medically. And then from there, what happens? Switching a sample at that point, that's that would be extremely easy.
Yeah. Yeah, I think if they wanted to have influence, they could.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and here's the thing: is you never know. I do remember when we were in Abu Dhabi that um those guys like to bet, and that's the thing you don't know is, but obviously you can hear it even with Topuria. Is Topuria Muslim?
I don't
Georgians
think so. No, I don't
yeah,
believe so.
Georgians are not typically Muslim, but he was still. It was his name they were chanting, not Max's during the fight. You know,
Yeah.
and So what if somebody made $1 million bet on Chimaev? And just make sure he doesn't get his blood test checked before we switch it, just in case.
Yeah, I mean, I was alluding to a particular YouTuber who was talking about the weigh-in. I don't think there's any shenanigans with the weigh-in personally, but what I think he misses the boat on, and I was going to comment on this on his page, is that if they wanted to have influence there, they easily could because they have a lot of pull with the UFC, no doubt about it.
Yeah, look, at some point, the UFC's over there, you know, what are the money exchanges? Maybe if they still, maybe they do own 10% still. Maybe they don't, but maybe, again, I have a conspiracy theory that part of the UFC income stream that you never see, and this comes from their background as casino people, is that they serve as the house for the big time betters. The What's the name of the Irish guy that bets on boxing?
Kinahan?
Yeah,
Okay.
Kinahan, and people of that ilk that can say, you don't think there's a sheik or two who might say, "I'll bet $5 million on Chimaev," and then you know speculation, but I think this occurs in the Russian culture as well. The Russians, Kadyrov, those guys, they're not averse to betting. And if you think Kadyrov is, like on his phone going, "Hold on, let me get my $40 bet in," just doesn't fit. That happens in China. The volume of betting in China, Vietnam, these countries is higher than in Las Vegas. Their cultures of betting. The Japanese, not so much. I don't even think there are casinos in Japan. If they are, they're private and
They
small,
have
but
a
not.
pachinko parlors.
Yeah,
You know,
and pachinko's. Japan's an
you have to
interesting
go
place.
somewhere else to get
Yeah, you
your
you
little
win, you get
prize, and you go
tickets.
somewhere
Yeah,
else. Yeah.
you win, you get tickets, and then when you go to the tickets, it's funny. I took a fighter over there, and pachinko is a kind of a coordination game, and this kid won some money. He caught on to how the thing worked, and he won some money. Um, but yeah. So Japan not so much, but Vietnam, China, Russia, the Arab countries, you'll find big time bettors all over those places. England, the Kinahan. So and betting does have an effect on, like, you don't want to lose your bet. That's why you have this rush of the fights. It affects the way you take it in. So then from there, what level will they go to? It's very questionable and completely unpoliced. So that's what makes you want, if what do they say? If if the cats are away, the mice will play. There's nobody policing that.
Yeah. I mean, everything you say is true as far as that goes. So there's always the potential for that I think this particular YouTuber missed on. Because he's only thinking about, the weigh-ins. There, like you said, there could be more to that. If they wanted to have some shenanigans, they probably could do so.
Yeah, yeah. And we've seen guys not get called out for touching the towel and holding themselves up to take a couple of ounces or grams off of their weight and stuff. But I'm talking about major money bettors. Where are they? And the potential that opens up for cheating in countries that are authoritarian with nobody watching.
Yeah, it's an interesting topic. I'm sure we could go a long time on that. Another interesting topic that we wanted to cover on this that kind of just got some news is that it looks like, um, in all likelihood, probably the judge is going to approve this new settlement that the UFC has put out, or they have a hearing for it. And in February of 25. So it's a little ways away. But
Yeah.
one of the things that I wanted to ask you about was if this goes through and the attorneys get 115 million, whatever it might be, would they be more apt to sit on the second trial since they already got paid out a pretty large sum? To
Second,
hold out for more money is what I mean.
yeah, I don't think I mentioned it earlier. I don't think anybody says no to money. You know what I mean? So I think that there may be some of the guys on the team that say, I'm good. You know, it's one of those things that I do believe that the main reason for this settlements that are, for all intents and purposes, it's still inappropriate, is fatigue. That and this is one of those cases where the UFC just put their heads down, charged forward, business as usual. They've never stopped making money. They could pay a lot more. And you've got fighters sitting there being like, I, my mortgage is, I'm having trouble with my mortgage. I've got, you know, my kids are going to go to college. I could really, and they just waited it out. So, yeah, they added about 50 million to the settlement, but took out the whole second class. So the guys in the first class are going to make a decent amount more money than they were due in the first settlement.
Yeah, I think it's huge because now they're paying out more than they wanted to for both classes. They're just paying out for one.
Right, right. And the second class, I think that the UFC has tainted those people with um, clauses and more exotic and more enhanced contracts and lawyers involved that they may make it hard for the second class. I think, like I said, I still think that the solution to this is for some type of real investigation from the FBI to look into all the finances that went on there for those and some of those clauses to, perhaps actually be eliminated. I'm not sure the ins and outs of all that, but if a clause asks you to do something illegal, like, you know, are those clauses illegal? Because if they are, then they should be taken out of the contract, and that would solve the problem. And then also, the UFC could not fall back and say, "Well, they signed a clause that said that they won't sue us, or that that we're going to go to arbitration for everything, or whatever other myriad of clauses that they probably inserted in there to protect themselves." If those were declared a monopoly and a problem, then that changes it, and then maybe the guys in the second class will get paid. But I think that type of thing is a long way away, and we'll see. There are other problems with it. If you remember, I think has the problem been solved where if you fought, overseas, that you're not going to get a payout for those fights? What's
I
the
haven't heard
difference?
anything about that.
It was one of the things that came up where,
Right.
like, foreign fighters and things like that, and we haven't heard anything, which means it's probably still the case.
Yeah, I haven't heard if it's been solved. No. Probably
Hey,
still is the case.
if I was Anderson Silva, who fought in Brazil a few times, Stephen Bonner's no longer with us, but he fought Anderson in Brazil. Stephen, you know, rest in peace, but Stephen was a guy that, didn't walk away from the UFC with millions of dollars. So he might have enjoyed, having another fight count for his payout. And what makes that legal? Hey, you fought in Europe, you fought in the States, in Brazil, you don't get paid for those fights. Those are lawyers talking. If the judge were strong enough to say, well, that's also getting thrown out, then yeah, the UFC is still charging forward, running through, and just doing business as usual, and they're not getting called out on every aspect of this. We haven't even touched upon the other businesses besides the fighters that they did run into the ground. And that is what constitutes a monopoly, not just underpaying fighters. It's controlling every aspect of the money coming in, including big money bettors. Nobody's asking those questions, but where is all their income streams? How can we find all that out?
Yeah, I don't know if we'll ever find that out unless they do an independent investigation, like you talked about.
Yeah,
And what are the
yeah,
rules for that? What is the thing that would cause that? Can it even be done related to this trial? I don't even know that.
yeah. For the trial, I don't know it either. I can tell you there are, I think, better examples. You know, the UFC is looking at this like an easy fight. They just throw lawyers at it, fatigue the enemy, pay out a pittance compared to their actual coffers and what they have. But I think you've seen better examples of antitrust hitting Facebook and big tech companies in Europe. Why is Sweden, England, why are places like that where fighters fought and they're not getting a payout? Why aren't those people also asking for an investigation? At least finances on those shows. Maybe they can't get access to everything in the United States, but there's no comprehensive plan to attack them. And I think that there is a lot to attack there.
Yeah, I'm just curious. Like I said before, I wonder what you thought of now that they're going to get their 115 mil from the first one. Me personally, I don't know. If I was a lawyer, I might say, I got a pretty big payout. Maybe I can hang on here on the second one. See if I can
Yeah,
get more out of them because I don't have to worry about getting zero like I did before.
that's a case by case basis because I think um, if you have a legal team of 30 people, some of them are going to be like, look, I'm going to take my couple million, go out. I'll give you a perfect example. Within the UFC, when Zuffa sold to Endeavor, Joe Silva checked out. He took his payout and said, I'm done. And Joe
So
was,
did the Fertitas
well, well,
on paper,
it's
at least.
yeah, it's different levels of money. You know what I mean? So if the Fertitas, you can understand because they were selling the company. Joe took uh, what would you call it? Just a payout, a severance pay.
I wonder how much it
And
was.
Joe was probably underpaid for years, even after Meyerowitz and stuff. And part of it is because Joe, at the end of the day, was passionate about the sport. And I don't think that, I think that they orchestrated things, that they gave him enough power. They let him make his matches and stuff, and then Dana took over for Chuck and the big guys, and I don't think, and he can make a decision. Okay, I'm going to give this guy a raise from 40 to 50. And I think that was enough to alleviate him, and I don't think Joe really had a full grasp. It's just speculation, but I don't think he really had a full grasp of exactly what was going on with all the big money. And obviously, it's a billion company worth $15 billion now, so there was big money there. And if he didn't catch on, maybe he did, but he was willing to look the other way.
Do you think they do that the same with Sean Shelby and Mick Maynard, or do you think they're getting a higher end than
I
Silva
think
did?
I think those guys are mid level management. I think they're getting very well compensated, but I don't. You never. Dana's got $500 million in the bank. They say, or have his net worth is $500 million. That's not the level of those guys. I think those guys are willing to take middle management. And it's funny. You want to hear conspiracy theories? Those guys may actually have something like the P Diddy effect, where senior management's got something on them. So therefore, they really don't have a huge and powerful negotiating spot to stand in.
Yeah, I've heard some things like that, not exact details, but yeah, similar to what you're alluding to.
Yeah,
That they weren't buttoned up in their own private lives, perhaps.
yeah. I think they came onto the scene very young, and you do stupid stuff, and all of a sudden you realize, maybe I shouldn't have done that. It has to do with some sordid stuff, swingers clubs and setting up management companies with connections to them. So for example, the UFC, as long as the UFC is making money, they don't care. So Sean Shelby and Maynard may have the ability to ask the management companies for additional checks and take money on the side. You know, usually it's called double dipping or something like that. That might not, But I've worked for managers or matchmake as a matchmaker for promoters. Some of them frowned upon me taking money from the fighters. I never really did, but there were certain promoters that I was told, go ahead and charge them a percentage. You know, um, so yeah, as long as the money's not coming out of the Endeavor coffers, that may be a spot to look the other way. Put it this way, I don't think Maynard and Shelby are starving.
Oh yeah, for sure. I'm sure they're compensated quite well. Um, Maybe we should talk a little bit about the PFL. I know we wanted to kind of wrap up with that. So Ngannou had his fight with Ferreira. Very, very impressive. He took him down and just clobbered him. But overall, what was your overall impressions of the Ngannou fight, and how PFL comes out of this?
I don't think if Ngannou got paid 20 million, 10 million, whatever, and I don't think they got their money's worth. You know, I wonder if we'll ever hear what the pay-per-view number was or anything like that. You know, again, these guys are over in Saudi Arabia, and money seems to flow there. So maybe maybe Don Davis pocketed the money that makes him happy with all his passion for the sport. You can give your anecdote there, but I don't think the UFC feels threatened. I think Dana was pretty clearly on the record before the fight saying that he was rooting against Ngannou. That he thought Ngannou had made a mistake. Ngannou was obviously going to make more money with the UFC, even with the boxing matches he had and stuff like that. Again, that's just semantics. I don't think that's the case, or else Ngannou, wouldn't have.
BS. Yeah, I don't
Yeah,
believe it.
but it shows Dana's capability of being disdainful of things that don't go the way he wants or operates there. What worries me about the PFL in this particular case is that I think they have a heavyweight tournament that's going to finish up here. They've got a couple of Russian guys in there. There's that Russian problem again, but that's who's Ngannou's next opponent's going to be. So Ngannou remains the only viable name in the books. And how many times are people going to actually, really care about watching him fight when his opponents are always unknowns? And I don't think, the marketing machine of the UFC is what's incomparable here, because you do know most of the main card fighters already and things like that. The PFL is a void of name recognition. There's nothing there. They emphasize doing a tournament in Europe, like what? People are going to wake up early or go to bed late to go watch these fights. You know what I mean? Um, it hasn't helped them in the United States market at all. And I don't think after Don Davis's comments about how he doesn't watch MMA, you almost think that, yeah, there's something else going on there. Yeah, he's getting paid, he's making his money, and the machine just rolls on. But without some passion, and I think you wanted to credit me with saying that Don Davis had no passion a long time ago. I think he just proved that, right? With no passion, that's what made the UFC what it is today. Dana at least had passion for it. Joe Silva was a big contributor from the pre-Zuffa days to that. Joe Silva had passion for this. You know, the, the Ray Cephalo is Ray Cephalo still with the PFL? Like he was at least a fighter, right?
I haven't seen him front and center, but I saw him a lot, like when it was leading up to the Bellator sale, the thing that I broke that I was paying a lot of attention to. I had seen him doing comments, but I hadn't really seen
Yeah.
much of him in press conferences lately. Maybe I need to look that up. I would assume so.
So yeah, there's a lot of lack of having the UFC. The UFC at least is a complete machine. They are operating on all fronts, and there's so many people there. And with the PFL, there's a void of their executives. We don't know who they are. Don Davis disappears, for months at a time. They announce, $1 million tournaments, and then do something quite cheesy like put the tournaments in Europe for $100,000. You know, so these it's not anything that the UFC is even going to worry about.
Yeah,
They're
Sethel
not
still has himself listed as president of the PFL.
fantastic. See, what a contribution he's made. You know what I mean? So that's the problem the there is nothing about that company that is worrying the UFC or making them think, man, they're closing the gap. The gap is expanding. They just did the Ngannou fight with Ferreira in Saudi Arabia. So what? That didn't help. That didn't help. Maybe Don Davis got a bonus for bringing in the show or whatever that he pocketed and put in his account. But did anything happen there that made the UFC think, wow, they took our spotlight for a little while? Nothing.
But maybe this second class trial could help them if there are some serious business changes, because then now there's a more competition for talent.
We have speculated in the past that might be what the end game is for the PFL. Kind of wait for maybe the trial to change the landscape of the sport. That there may be some competition. In extreme cases, if you speculate, the trial could wind up with nulling every UFC contract if they're ruled illegal. But let's be honest, it doesn't look like any of that's going to happen. You know what I mean? It looks like the UFC is once again going to pull off what they usually pull off, which is just business as usual, keep going forward, act like you're never wrong, and most people will believe you.
I don't know. I mean, they're coughing up a lot more money for only one class. They thought
Vic,
they were going to get out of this with just
for me and you,
335 for both.
for
That
me
is a
and
big
you,
change.
for me and you,
Yeah.
it's a lot more money. At the end of the day, we don't know what the payout for the second is going to be. Let's say they do decide to take that to trial. That may result in people not getting paid at all as well.
Or they could lose a lot more money if they lose.
Yeah, but what's a lot more money? Because right now they were going to do 335 million, and the lawyers put on the internet that they got out of the settlement. They actually arrogantly said, this is how we're accounting for it on the books for this year and everything like that. And now, on top of that, they're asking Dana White to pay the extra money going into the settlement now from his own pocket easily. It's not a lot of money for me. Of course, for me and you, it sounds like a lot of money, but what they did is they threw a tiny crumb, and even the judge now looks to me to be fatigued. Whereas the judge looked like he was going to play hardball with them and force it to go to trial and things like that. He's now at the end of the day taking a very small amount of money for what this company's worth in order to settle out that settlement. So yeah, I disagree. It's a lot of money for them, and that's the main issue, is that we're not getting to the core of what the problems are here. So I don't think that we're going to get satisfaction. And if Don Davis thinks he's going to wait them out for another couple of years for that second settlement, and then he's going to find passion and play hardball, that isn't happening either.
You're the biggest fan of the PFL.
It is what it is. Every once in a while, I hope we did an interview recently with TJ Thompson, and I like the executives and the people I know from ONE FC. I've had long relationships with those people. Matt Hume, I've sent fighters to train with him. I pay for that out of my own pocket. Charlie Pearson, who's one of their matchmakers, held a belt on one of my organizations. I wish they were ready to be a player as well, but I think that they're satisfied with controlling the Asian market to the level that they do, and we'll see. I think that they might be planning a Hawaii show is a crumb, and it's again not something that the UFC. There's no way like Dana called up freaking Hunter at 2 in the morning. And was like, "Did you hear? What's going to Hawaii?" It's a speck, a fly, a pest. It's nothing to them. So there's nothing affecting the UFC's business as usual attitude, and that's the main problem.
Oahu doesn't have a venue big enough for them. They're not going to do the stadium. The stadium's being renovated anyways. They're not going to do an outdoor show there, and there's no indoor venue that's nearly big enough for the UFC. They prefer to do about 25,000, I
Yeah,
think, is
no,
what
no,
they.
they
They
don't
don't
need to
have
go
a
to that.
venue for that. They don't.
Yeah, they don't need to go to. That's the thing is they don't need to go to Hawaii. Hawaii is so here. TJ, who gave us a great interview and a lot of great insight, and he was definitely an early pioneer and one of the early guys that at least showed some business acumen and success and was honest in terms of telling the fighters, man, you just beat my ticket sellers, that kind of stuff. But the game for one is going to be, guess what, guys? We're going to Hawaii. And every fighter's gonna be like, yeah, I would like to go to Hawaii, and they're gonna fight, and then they're gonna move on, and then they're never gonna, it's never gonna amount to anything, and they may actually save some budget money because fighters, I would like to go to Hawaii. I actually never got a chance to go to Hawaii, so you know what I mean. It's like if somebody had said, why don't you come corner a guy, I would have jumped on that. And those are the kinds of things that are used as incentive. Nice trips for fighters, and then all of a sudden the contract money isn't as high, or it doesn't increase the way it should because it's like, oh, but we're going to Hawaii, and people are like, oh yeah, we're going to Hawaii. It just that's the level of what's going on there in my book. It's not something that leads to an inroads for one to be in the United States. I think they've already dropped the ball on their plans. They successfully did a show in Denver. We're supposed to follow up with a show in Atlanta. Never heard about it. Never happened. And now they're like, oh, we're thinking about going to Hawaii. They sound like pipe dreams. And Matt Hume has a history of bringing people to Hawaii. So yeah, Matt wants to go back to Hawaii. But I don't think that there's an organized plan there. I think Chowdhury, their boss, is kind of a hands-on controlling type of power, so that he makes the final calls and things. Um, but I don't see, and he does seem to have passion for the sport, a little, more than Don Davis, obviously. But I don't see with him the ability to compete with the UFC. They just have not shown a single sign of that.
Yeah, and I
I
wouldn't I
saw I
wouldn't be
saw
surprised if it didn't come off because I mean, like even with the UFC, the state tourism authority is like, you're going to pay us,
I
not the
give
other.
you
We're not going to pay your site fee. You're going to pay us to have a show here.
and one has these standards of like, well, you got to be undefeated or you got to be a champion, and even in your own sport, like they'll take guys from kickboxing and let Y and these other sports that are combat sports and pretty rugged stuff in over there, but their standards make it difficult for them to complete a roster. So they get to a card where they have 5 or 6 fighters or 5 or 6 fights, like in Denver, or 6 or 7 or whatever it was. And the guys have nice resumes and stuff like that. And you can fill it up. Oh, 8-0 versus 10-0 and this, that, and the other stuff. It doesn't give you the full roster of competition. And one of the things that tells me that their business model is really not suited for the states. And that's the part about Chowdhury is like, I don't think Chowdhury's going to want to change his contracts. I think he owns a lot of what could almost be illegal in the states over there because they just operate under different laws. But there's a prospect out of Michigan, a young kid. He's 20 years old. Named he's probably 22 now, but named Austin Bashi. I don't know if you've heard this name. And Austin got a contract from them because he was undefeated. and he's on the Contenders show. So in other words, the ONE FC contract couldn't even compete with Dana White's Contender show to get what is literally one of the top prospects in the States right now.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised that a White show doesn't come off personally.
Yeah, I
And that's
agree.
not that I lack, confidence in TJ or anything. I just think the state. I mean, TJ doesn't even do shows anymore, so that should tell you something. The state is so
Yeah,
hard to work with. That's why the UFC hasn't gone there. The state, they aren't like these other states. They're willing to cough up a bunch of money for the UFC to come to their city or whatever. They aren't. We don't need you here. We have plenty of tourism here. You can pay us, or you're not coming.
yeah. No, that has a lot to do with it and stuff. And I think, yeah, like I said, Hawaii was always kind of a like a little world unto itself, like a little island there where they could attract people, put on great shows and great fights and things like that. Um, we've used the word passion in this podcast a few times. Those early Hawaii shows under TJ when it was young and things, you were at some of them. You mentioned it. The passion of the
Many.
fans, the passion of the whole operation was palpable. And now, the government steps in. We did shows in Milwaukee with Dave Strasser, and some of the things that happened there until the boxing commissions crushed everything, and asked for $5,000 bonds from small promoters and things, and you don't see those shows anymore. Um, but yeah, just the landscape of the sport is changing. There's a lot of non. It's still the money's still being divided up too much by non-fighters, whether they be commissioners or yes people or whatever. Not enough is going to the fighters, and that's having an effect.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff for sure. You know, it's
We've had a good podcast.
yeah, you always provide great insights on this stuff, and for fans that are watching the channel, we've been kind of combining the MMA collector stuff kind of slowly. I've been uploading some of that, so you can check out that stuff and make sure you subscribe, like some of these videos, share some of them if you like. Um, more support, the better. And Miguel, you
Yeah,
have
check
anything you want to sign off on?
yeah, just check Todd out on Instagram too because he does a lot of clipping of videos and things for Instagram, and some of those short videos, will give you a chance, to not spend an hour and a half here listening to long talk, but still get a lot of great insight from what Todd and I do. So good stuff.
Yeah, Miguel, as always, it's great to talk to you. And like I said, you always provide great insight on these topics. And everybody that watches this, we always appreciate your support. We have memberships you can sign up for, 99-cent memberships. And, feel free to subscribe, share it with other people. And as always, we appreciate the support. And until next time, take care.